So like for with any financial CV or engineering CV or even a sales CV, see the foundation is academic, right, and a professional rigor. That's what, especially as a fresher. And this is I'm pitching this as a fresher, so it's not for the the experienced guy. So most of you can relate to it. When I say fresher, is anybody less than 5 years. Okay, so even people in that bracket can sort of use the same sort of foundation, right? So one is your academic and professional rigor that needs to come out, very clearly on your resume. The structure is going to be how you're going to narrate what you've achieved through your career, right? Now, I say engineering or entry into high finance because there are different aspects, and I relate that to engineering because I come back from an engineering background. But there are different aspects within the CV that you need to study and structure and format, like an engineer builds a rocket, right? So that's how I would say that. Let's move on to the first slide. Here, the most important piece I want to say is precision over personality. A lot of people spend a lot of time on the colors, fonts. Say, let me space it around. Let me add some, logos. And especially now with AI and everybody, boosting that whole visual appeal, people start adding photos and backgrounds and all of that. I've had, and I've been on the recruiting committee for a while. I've had done interviews also for a while, so I understand and I've seen a whole plethora of such resumes. And trust me, it does not create an impression unless and until you are in marketing or advertising. Okay, and if you're in that space, then yeah, you need to create a very different portfolio for a resume, and I'm not the right person to be talking about that. But if you are in finance or engineering or sales or anything to do with corporate, then you want to skip all of that jazz. I call it jazz, right? In finance, you want to very clearly say that how your CV is going to come out as your prospectus. Like you are the asset sitting at the core, and how is your CV going to speak for you, right? So number one, precision. When I say you've got to do a spell check, okay, you cannot believe the number of resumes that come inside, and they have ridiculous financial errors that have been written, grammatical errors that have been written, and spell checks that are not being done. It cannot be stressed more than ever, right? And to relate to finance, it's like a fat finger trade waiting to happen. Like you have a fat finger and you have your stock, declining there, right? So one typo is equal to immediate rejection. So double check and then triple check on your spell checks and your grammatical. If you're not very clear with grammar today, you have the help of Claude, Gemini, ChatGPT. Try and get the grammar clear from there. Don't copy those statements because that is going to be flagged up in ATS, but use that as a complementer to what you're writing, right? So that will help you clear out your language. I'm gonna keep pausing after two or three statements. So if anybody has queries or wants to stop me or wants to have any discussions, I'm open to it, because this is, I don't want to keep this as a monologue. I want you guys to sort of participate and tell me where you feel you have doubts, or where you feel, hey, I don't want to do this, right? So you can also tell me that, right? Now, this is the visual standard with any resume. You want to keep it strictly to one page, no exceptions. Okay, all the way until 10 years of experience, your resume should not exceed one page. That's the number one rule you need to keep, right? Now, with regards to the visual appeal of the resume, it always helps to have a good real estate. What do we mean by good real estate? Is sufficient spacing of white in the resume. That's around your borders, even between the bullets, and even between the main chunks of the paragraph. And I'll show you an example towards the end, what you understand by visual spacing, right? That's very critical. If your resume seems too cluttered, the person who is reading it is going to lose interest in that. And that being said, you do not want to have any photos. I see some people sending photos. We don't want photos in that. We don't want graphics in there. Most of people in finance is, as much as you like to believe it, it's a dry field. It's not as exciting as a developer's field, where you want to say, okay, we want to show some graphics, want to show some numbers. We don't want to do that. We want to keep it as dry as possible. You want to amplify your message more than the graphics. And then don't include casual hobbies. I see people writing, I play chess, I surf, and I play guitar and all. It does not make sense, right? How does a person sitting in Goldman Sachs or sitting in Waterbridge Investments really bother with that? That does not really connect. But What you want to state is, if you are a state level player and if you have performed on and achieved something, right, and that proves that you've shown dedication and rigor in that sport. Like for example, you played at the London School of Music, which shows that you've studied for 10 years in that along with your finance. Then I'd say, I'd encourage you to put that. But unless and until it's not a flashy thing to show, skip it off, right? Don't bring it out there. Now, on the next piece is the strategic information. This is how I would say any resume should look out there. This is the hierarchy, right? Especially for a fresher. When you get into an experience profile, the layering of these changes a bit, and I'll tell you how that changes. At the very top, you want to have the header. What is the header? It's very cleanly your contact info, your professional email, and your LinkedIn. Please do not use emails like cool guy 2003, and such things do not fly, right? You want to have it very professional, if possible, like Harsh underscore Randera or Dennis underscore Thomas. Try to get such very clean emails which shows professionalism even in your email, right? And if you are active on LinkedIn and if you're making posts on LinkedIn and if you feel your LinkedIn is going to add value, put a link to LinkedIn even on your header itself. So that very clearly shows that you're active on social media. Then, especially for a fresher, I say I cannot stress it enough. The education, your ranking, and your different entrance exams that you've given really matter. And if you have scored high on these entrance exams, bring it out there. If you have a GPA above 3.5 or a CGPA above 3.5, bring it out there. Showcase it. If you have below that, don't showcase it, right? Just avoid, just keep it, right? See, the goal here is not lying, but the goal here is masking information that doesn't sell your profile, right? If you have information that is selling your profile, if you have information that's going to catch their eye, showcase it out, right? Amplify what you're good at, mask what you're not good at. Okay. And the evidence is, now this is the core of the resume, right? This is your experience. You always want to reverse chronological. What I mean by that is, have the most recent job on the top, followed by the subsequent ones. And towards the end, you want to have your toolkit, right? That's the bottom part where we call the toolkit, which is essentially your a combination of skills and certification, right? You see, I've mentioned Bloomberg, CFA modeling, right? That's where your skills and your toolkits are going to come there. If you have this, definitely showcase that. I see a hand up now.
So, Dennis,
Yes.
if someone has an experience, like if someone wants to switch careers, like in some other field, but now wants to get into finance, but has marketing roles prior to that, so should I skip adding my marketing role in finance? Is that what you're saying when you say mask your?
So see, for example, it won't when you're switching, right? And in fact, switching careers is a very different topic, right? It's not just
Okay.
the resume that needs to be tweaked in. It's also your cover letter, your pitch, your soft skills. A lot of things have to be built when you're switching careers. Okay, especially see, you can look at this resume. Anytime you want to have your education above your experience is when you have less than 2 years of experience, right? That's when
Hmm.
you want to say, okay, my education comes at top, and then my experience comes. Once you have crossed that 2 year sort of mark or that 2 year milestone, you want to move your education near your toolkit. Okay, your experience will go on the top just after your header. You have a very clear objective statement, what you intend to do for the company. Don't tell them you're looking for this job. They already know that, right? I see that a lot in the resume. I'm looking for this job and I have this. Please don't
Hmm.
put that, right? You can put that in a cover letter, but don't put it in a resume, right? Now,
Okay.
on to your point on Harsh, on when you're switching careers, right? See, the number one thing that people miss out and feel that, hey, I'm in finance, how am I going to get into marketing? Or I'm in marketing, how am I going to get into finance? See, when people think about job roles, they just look at a toolkit, right? And toolkit, yes, is needed. Like, for example, in marketing and finance, and I can draw parallels, right? And how can I draw parallels? Because I've been in the fields, in multiple fields for a while. What you can do as freshers is, if you want to get into marketing, the easiest way I would say is to go and look at 5 different job descriptions out there in the market, right? Look at the companies you want to really target. Look at, say, for example, if you're marketing, maybe Hindustan, Unilever,
Hmm.
Kellogg's, your what is that? Your Mondelez. A lot of companies that focus a lot on marketing, they will
Hmm.
definitely have marketing and advertising sort of roles, right? You want to go and see what your job descriptions mean, right? Now,
Hmm.
out of the chunk of the points that I mentioned, a lot of it may not make sense to you. Some of it may make sense to you from a financial standpoint as well. You will see that, okay, Excel, for example, modeling and insights on data is something that's very common to marketing as well as to finance. You might see that, hey, these people are using some database over here while we use Bloomberg. They are using a different fact check for their customer insights, right? That's how
Hmm.
you start drawing parallels. And
Okay.
as you read about it more, you can in the interview then start talking like you worked on a database, because there are a lot of commonalities between the two. And then start polishing your soft skills before you start, upgrading or getting a certification. That's how you make the transition into a different career. So it's a very different push rather than just modifying the resume. There are different things that
Okay.
you need to, one, start looking at is the toolkit. Second is with regards to your soft skills, which matters a lot when you're switching jobs. And third is then how you start amplifying certain experiences within your job profile also. So as a financial analyst also, there will be different skill sets that a marketing guy might need. You might be managing a team, you might be managing a cross-functional team, you might be managing a cross-geographical team, which might be a
Hmm.
lot of value to a marketing company. That's how you try and make that switch. So it's not a the resume is not the one-stop solution for that.
Yeah, yeah. Got it. Got it. Thank you so much.
Then is the valuation phase. Like all of you guys love valuation, so I thought, okay, let's talk about valuation, right? In finance and in any career, your education is your primary asset, especially for a fresher. And here I have given a very clear example as to how your education should look like. If you've done your Bachelor of Commerce, wherever you've done it from, what's your CGPA? You're getting more than the top CGPA, you sort of highlighted that. If you had an all India rank, which is in the top 50, you need to highlight that. What's your percentile on CAT? As these pointers will come and show you that, one, you are a person of high pedigree and high value and high intelligence, right? Two, it shows dedication when I'm showing that the person has scored this, which means that you spent a significant amount of time trying to get into that top high percentile. And then include relevant coursework. So if you're applying for a buy side or sell side research firm, your experience or exposure into corporate finance, into valuation, into derivatives, and into macroeconomics matters a lot to them. You want to bring that relevant coursework over there, because you're not going to have a lot of experience to talk over here. So your education needs to sell your profile. And then projects, which I think are very valuable these days. A lot of people do internships. You want to mention just one line on your project. So this is the first piece, right? So now we're sort of peeling the resume. This is the first piece on the just after your header. Now, this is the SOFOT test. I call it, moving from a typical just an action to moving to that star format. And I'm sure a lot of people have heard about it. What does the star stand for? Each bullet in your resume should depict a star format. It stands for situation, task, action, and result. Okay. So you want to describe what situation you are in, what tasks were handed over to you, what actions did you take to fulfill those tasks, and what result did you achieve by doing all of this, right? And in a very quantified manner, in a very crisp manner, in a very articulate manner. What I've seen is people try to get into star and they write these, 2 or 3 line paragraphs, which again loses the interest. You want to have it very crisp and very clearly you want to highlight those things. See, as a fresher, you don't want to showcase things also that feel like, hey, how did this guy, start doing this? You want to be honest with what you did in the company, but you want to enhance what you did. Like for example, and I've shown you what is a beat. Like I've seen so many, and you won't believe it. I've seen this in the even in 15-year plus experience profiles where they say that, okay, I've helped a team with financial model, right? This lacks specificity, this lacks transformation, this lacks result. You can see a stronger quantified achievement on the bottom. What did I do in that financial modeling? I constructed a three-statement DCF model. Where did I do it for? I did it for a mid-cap manufacturing firm. What did that help? I identified a 15% undervaluation. So you're showing a very clear result. And what did that help it in the end? That informed a buy side recommendation, whether to buy, hold, or sell. Right? So that is what I mean by a quantified achievement versus just a description of your duties. Now here, again, this is another example of showing that, how you can showcase the same formula, right? One is your accomplishment, where you're showing your impact, where you say that, okay, you've saved almost 15 hours of manual entry. If you've built a model, if you've built a macro, if you've done some error checks, there is a quantification format to each of this, right? However, once you've done that, one you've reduced your manual errors. Second, you've also improved the efficiency if you've sort of automated something. And that's an example of what did you do it by. You did it by using some macros or stuff. Now, most critical out here, and that should be seen trickling across through your resume, is when you're talking of different profiles or different experiences, you want to talk the language of the street. Now, when I say street, I mean Wall Street. But depending on the profile or the position or the industry you are in, you want to talk the lingo of that particular profile or that particular industry. It helps to have high energy verbs start on every bullet point, right? If you are in the analytical field and you want to target that, which is mostly to do with equity research, you want to use verbs like model, forecasted, audited, which come up as the start of your statement, right? If you are in that mid-career segment and you have a lot of execution, or you into orchestration of multiple teams and geography, you want to look at this piece as well, where you're having a lot of execution elements. And if you are in that 10-year plus bracket or 7-year plus bracket, where you have very clear leadership skills, you want to have a majority of the bullet points which are focused on these, high energy verbs. It's very critical to use past tense for your previous roles, because you're no longer in those previous roles, and you want to use present tense for your current roles. A lot of people miss out on these aspects, and I know and I understand that this does not happen in one day. This takes a few days and a few weeks, and maybe in some cases even a few months before your resume gets ready for the market. Right? So you need to look across and start tweaking and start optimizing on each aspect of your resume, so that the reader who is reading your resume, who spends less than 10 seconds, is attracted and wants to hire you in that specific time slot. Now, this is the technical mode, right? I call it the mode. I just want to stress is an archaic term from the early centuries, where they used to have a moat around the castle to deter enemies from coming into the castle and raiding the castle. The moat could be a body of water around the castle. It could be very high walls that are preventing the enemies from coming out, or it could be the fact that your castle is on the top of a mountain, right? So depending on how you define your moat, your castle has lesser probability of getting beaten. Now, you use that same lingo even in how you create your resume, right? Now, layer one foundation, and that a lot of people might use here and already know, and might already be having it in their resumes, is your Excel deep dives, is your layer one foundation. That's required a lot, especially when you're targeting roles on equity research and when you're targeting roles on derivatives and similar sort of profiles. You showcase that you've done Excel deep dives like pivot tables, X lookups, sensitivity analysis, use of VBAs and macros. This is your layer one foundation. But how do you expand it from there? Now, that's how you build your pyramid, or you build your technical mode, or you start building your specific profile, which is different to the other profiles, right? Now you get onto the second layer, which is your entire piece of data and visualization and coding, right? So you understand the basics, where you're just dealing with data and a lot of numbers, and you're really good at it. But now you move on to the second layer, where you're now trying to create insights and get insights from that data, right? This is where you move into the territory of Tableau, you move into Power BI, you move into SQL, you move into Python. And these tools, or some of these tools, might feel overwhelming for a lot of finance professionals, but I would highly recommend getting out there and getting trained on one of these or more than one of these visualization tools, because this will, one, not only make you good on your research, but will also help you get to the next stage, where you can very clearly start articulating the insights that you've got from the data. That's very critical, right? And the next layer, which is your specialization layer, which really creates a distinction compared to the others in that specific job profile, is your finance specific profiles, right? Your exposure to terminals like Bloomberg, Reuters, FactSet, Capital IQ really showcase that, okay, you have a thorough understanding on the industry, you know how research is done, and you are also familiar with these tools. This gives a lot of confidence and a lot of attraction to employers who are looking to hire you. So I'll move on to the next topic, which is your signaling commitment on your career to finance. Now, one is most of you, I'm assuming, is familiar with the CFA, but that's your gold standard for asset management, right? If you are on the risk side, you want to look at FRM. If you're targeting, the Indian markets, you want to look at NISM. And now, at the end, you also want to look at modeling courses because this shows your practical ability to use all of this knowledge and start modeling in a very practical manner. Now, this is a I would say this is a common thing that is checked across careers, right? Be it marketing, be it management consulting, be it finance, be it sales, is the airport test. Would I want to be stuck in an airport with you? And a lot of people will be like, how does somebody judge that, right? Forgettable things when I read through a resume are reading, sports, traveling, listening to music. It's very generic, right? Specific. How do you create the hook on somebody who reads your profile and hey, this profile seems very interesting. Like I completed 100-kilometer cycling expedition. That's not something that everybody does. I'm not encouraging all of you to go and start doing that. But if you have a specific hobby that you feel will help you create that edge and create a distinction compared to the entire lot, then I would definitely encourage you all to do that. If there's a hobby, like for example, you're interested in economic history from the 20th century, and that's not something that everybody does. If you have a knowledge on that, do that. If you're a state level or national level squash player, again, that's not something you find on every profile. That's something that will highlight and distinguish your profile. So this is what I call the hook. And this is something which a lot of recruiters and a lot of people in the corporate look at on a profile to identify whether I want to be stuck with this person, because it shows that, okay, beyond, he's very good on Excel and all of his financial capabilities, but beyond that, what does his personality look like? Do I want to spend more time with him? And do I want to be stuck with you at an airport? That's what it shows. Also, you showcasing these specific skill sets, like for example, attaining a state level or national level accomplishment in a specific game, or about reading, which shows very clearly that you have to spend a few years or few hours every day of dedication. This shows discipline and this creates conversation, right? And this is what we call as the airport test when we look at a resume. Now, this is again, I would call this the quality assurance protocol. What you need to do when you are looking at a resume. I cannot stress the importance of precision. Precision in is precision out. So all of the words in should be grammatically checked and should be checked for spelling errors. Your format when you're sharing a CV should always be PDF format only. I can't stress the importance of this. The reason is when you upload resumes on Word or DocX or your Mac formats, many a times those specific fonts and those specific spacings are not available at the recruiter's machine. That leads to your entire resume format being messed up. So the only way you can ensure that the format is not messed up and it is portable across mobile phones, tablets, iPads, MacBooks, and Windows laptops is by creating a PDF format. The name itself says portable document format, which means that it is portable across devices and across operating systems. So highly encouraged to use only PDF for your resumes, never use Word. You want to use a very clear naming technique when you're sharing your CV. And I see CVs coming across in all irregular name formats. You want to have a very clear first name, underscore last name, underscore followed by the field that you want to focus on, right? It's finance or sales or marketing, right? I have seen this also in a lot of profiles, which I want to stress is no longer, meaningful. People say references available upon request. It's an obsolete practice, right? If I'm going to ask for your references, I'm definitely going to contact your employers and I'm going to, provide that. So this point is really not much meaning. And I can't stress the importance of this, but all of your bullet points, alignment, and all of that should be properly aligned to understand that there is proper time spent on the formatting and the entire visibility of the resume. And last but not the least, you want to check your action verbs. All of your past jobs should have your past tense verbs, and all of your present jobs should have your present tense verbs. Right. This brings us towards the end of the session. Here, I'm talking about some main pointers. Right. One is the format, which you want to have it very clean. You want to use basic fonts like serif or Times New Roman or Arial. You want to keep it very clean. The format, you want to have good amount of spacing. The second aspect is the content, right? What did you accomplish? What did you measure it by? and what did you do to accomplish that, right? So you had a 25% revenue growth, or you had an 18% decline in errors, or you reduced the man hours required to check the due diligences. And the third piece is the signals. Your signals are your, especially for a fresher, is your GPA. For an experienced professional, is the rise from a junior profile to a senior profile to somebody who's managing cross geography teams. And also, like, I know a bunch of people here would have completed the level 1 or the level 2, mentioning out there level 2 candidate. That shows dedication, that shows commitment, right? So I break it down in 3 categories, which is, one is your format, second is your content, and the third is your signals. And I want to stress this out there, because a lot of people start creating the CV as an autobiography. It's not an autobiography, right? That's good for professors who have, 20 papers and 200 papers to publish out there. This is a risk assessment document, and you need to mitigate your risk and highlight the alpha. I know alpha, a lot of people out here will relate to alpha is the stock terminology that I'm referring to. You want to mitigate your risk, you want to highlight your alpha, you want to highlight the strengths, you want to mask your weaknesses, and that's what is going to help you sell yourself better, right? So that I would say concludes my session here. Now I'd like to spend some time showcasing an actual resume. This is a typical Harvard template, and I'll share that with you, Harsh. And this is what is recommended for everyone up to 10 years of experience. Okay, so here to your queries, you have a summary. And let's start with your full name, right? This full name starts out here. If you have a job title, then you can showcase it out here, or you can just delete it and you can just give your address very clearly. Marking out where you're staying and what's your emails, your email you want to stress on, very professional emails, and then a summary pointer or a summary paragraph, which is essentially 1 or 2 lines or maximum 3 lines, which says what you are as a person or what you are as an individual, right? That should come out here in the very beginning of the document. And then you have your education category. Now the only difference for somebody who has greater than 5 years experiences, this education category will move after experience, and experience will come out here, right? For all of the people who are less than 3 years experience or 3 to 5 years, most of them will be highlighting the education, where you're showing very clearly your school name, your degree, and whatever honors and uh, certifications or courses you've done. Followed by your experience, again, very clearly, what's your company name, what city and state did you do it, what start date and end date. We don't want to mention months, we just want to mention years. That's enough. And okay, but very clearly, what was your title and what did you do within those roles? And within those roles, you want to have very clear star bullet formats to showcase that. And here, your leadership and activities can be a piece, especially for freshers, for somebody who is doing management level courses, or somebody who is doing a lot of your Wall Street level modeling, or somebody even in sports. A lot of those activities can come over here, which showcase a mix of leadership and other curricular activities. And towards the end are your skills. Here again, you want to highlight those skills which are relevant and which can be quantified and which are applicable to the job that you are applying. See, one is, I say number one error would be not checking for grammar, not checking for spell checks. And number two error is not highlighting the skill sets that the job needs. Like I've seen that across so many profiles where people send their resumes just like that, which is applicable to an equity sell side and does not apply to an equity buy side. Right. So even such nuances should be addressed in your profile, and what you want to get into and what profile you are targeting should be very clearly coming out in your profile, and the skill sets that the job needs should come out. If you are into equity research, then your skill sets on modeling, your skill sets on research should come out very clearly in your resume. If not, you're not going to get the profile. So Pratham, to your point, first, by the end of your college, you would have some idea into which profile you want to get into, which company you want to get into, right? You want to start looking at the job descriptions of that company and of that profile to see, okay, do you really like that profile? To start with, number one. If you still have inclination and desire to get into the profile, number two, you want to see what bullet points and what skill sets are they looking for. A typical resume or a typical job description that is calling for resumes will have 2 categories. One is a must-have job set, and second is a good-to-have job set. you definitely want to focus on the must-have skill set, especially for a fresher. You want to see, okay, what are they asking for that particular job role? And you want to go back and see that, okay, if I don't have these skill sets, how can I get those skill sets, right? One is maybe a structured format through doing a course or doing a certification. Two can be an unstructured format to interacting with industry experts in that space and spending some time and trying to understand what it is. And three is a more soft skill format where you spend some time reading through and perusing through relevant sources, which gives you that information. And once you have that, you then start structuring your profile. You start, in fact, it does not start with a resume. It starts with, writing down on a pen and paper, using a pen and paper and just writing down as to, what really appeals to me, what should I work on, what are my weaknesses. Once you have that down on a piece of paper, you can then start, structuring your actions that you need to take to build your profile. Once you build that profile, you can then start feeding it into your resume. So I would call it as a three-step process before you get to your resume. If you are in college and you're still thinking about, how do I get there? See, I understand that not all colleges might have access to Bloomberg, but for colleges that have, you all can take an access and then go and look at it. If you all do not have access, you can go to the Bloomberg website itself, and they have free trials and free versions of similar software which do a similar sort of activity like Bloomberg. Like for example, your fact checks and your background training and your background training to a lot of your background functions that are run in Bloomberg. Similar sort of software are available out there which can be simulated. So your experience even on those front will prove valuable. Now, some of them, like for example, Morningstar, Reuters, even tools like that or sites that regularly talk about fin shots, for example, which gives you an exposure to what's happening in finance on a daily basis, right? Even such podcasts tell the recruiter that you have a skill set which is beyond your Excel and your data. You are trying to understand where the industry is moving. You're trying to get a larger picture on what is eventually happening in the space. So, see, what is Bloomberg doing? Bloomberg is trying to analyze the economics, the macroeconomics, the entire ticker history, and all of that, right? If you cannot have access to Bloomberg, look at a similar tool to Bloomberg, which can sort of give you information to that. Also, you can look at a lot of the Bloomberg manuals, which are available for free, and you can download them and start reading through them, so you understand how the functionalities in that work.